Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Market Review, where we bring you developments in the financial and capital market as it affects the economy. Today, we'll be discussing around the mutual funds market, focusing on Nigeria's mutual funds market, what's really happening there, and what are the prospects. With me to have this conversation is Mr. Czartoryski. He's the head of research, Coronation Asset Management. Nice to have you on the program, Mr. Guy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abbasi. Very nice to be here.
Thank you. Let's first look at the report. It was published on ProShare, where the Coronation Asset Management revealed that the mutual funds recorded 1.6 trillion naira in assets recorded in 2020. What would be the factors that enabled that performance for mutual funds market, amidst the fact that last year was characterized by the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah. So I think that you correctly identified that we saw big growth in the mutual fund industry last year. And the key thing here is that people are becoming more familiar with funds. So they're becoming more confident about investing in funds and over the long term, whereas before they would have put their savings in banks and the default destination for saving was banks. Now they're seeing greater value in funds, particularly the biggest sector of the fund market, which is the money market fund, which from time to time will give you very good returns, and then the fixed income funds that are slightly smaller, and then the balance funds and the equity funds, infrastructure funds and things like that. Last year specifically, we saw a huge crash in interest rates. Banks were not able to give customers what they wanted. We saw a lot of money go into funds, and the total assets of the mutual fund industry in Nigeria grew by 50% last year to 1.6 trillion naira. But the point about that is that this is only 14% of the size of the much larger pension fund industry. So it remains a very small part of the overall savings industry.
At least it shows that, that 50% growth shows very interesting development in that space. I like the fact that people are beginning to be familiar with investing in funds. That awareness was there last year, and also greater value in money market funds and fixed income funds, like you said. One other aspect I found interesting in that report was the fact that there is a growing need or importance of adopting the global investment performance standards on reporting mutual funds, because it has a way of positioning Nigeria's mutual funds market. Can you elaborate further around that?
Absolutely, yeah, that's kind of the whole point of the report. Just to say at the outset, I don't think we're going to get to GIPS straight away, but I think there's certain things we can do to get us on the right road and move in that direction. So what we did in this report is we sent our analysts out to buy funds. And so they went out and they got the fact sheet and the prospectuses and the unit price performance of funds. So, a typical Nigerian saver would look at the unit prices of these funds. They're published every week. You can get them from the Fund Managers Association of Nigeria, FMAN. And then we plotted all these on a chart. And what we found was that actually the data is so dispersed, is so different, particularly if you look closely at the unit price performance of fixed income funds in 2020, that you cannot attribute that to performance. You cannot say one performance, one fund manager took better decisions than the other, and that's why you have this huge dispersion of fund performance. No. The reason for it is that the funds are reporting in different ways. They're using different accounting standards to get to their unit prices. And therefore, you can't compare the unit prices of the 17 fixed income funds that were operating throughout last year.
So different accounting standards to get unit prices for 17 mutual funds. that means to some extent that's how the GIPS can help to bring that standard that will position us globally. But you say if we can't get there quickly, we can make those efforts in that regard, which is very important for the market. What are the prospects for an over 50% growth for the mutual funds market? I would like to put it at the MF market, as COVID-19 is gradually easing in 2021. I mean, if we could grow at 50% amidst the pandemic, what makes us not see at least a 60-70% growth as the pandemic is easing this year?
But actually, one of the strange things about a pandemic is that people with money to spare actually save more because they go out less. So they travel less, they take fewer foreign trips, they take fewer airline journeys, they actually eat out less, and they actually save more. So in a strange way, the pandemic was actually something of a good thing for the savings industry because people had more cash in their bank accounts, they spent less, and then they went out and bought more funds. Also, interest rates last year were on the way down, so they were encouraged to go and buy these fixed income funds, some of which did extremely well. I don't think we're going to get 50% growth in the mutual fund industry this year, like we did last year, although I would very much like that to happen because I'm in the industry, I guess, or at least I do research for the industry. Yeah. But I think it will continue to grow. And I think as particular as we get higher interest rates towards the middle and the third quarter of the year, then I think you'll find more people getting into money market funds. And so I think it will continue to grow. But the point I'd make is more of a long-term point, which is that it may seem a rather nerdy and rather boring thing to talk about accounting standards, but actually they actually matter because in the long term you want to build confidence. You want to build a confident market. You want people to understand and to be educated about what they're buying and to be confident absolutely in what they hold and what the unit price of it is. So I think the issue we pinpoint in the report is that this is 1.6 trillion, but that's only a seventh or an eighth the size of the pension fund industry, which has been around for 20 years and is now a true financial force. So I think the mutual fund industry needs to look at its accounting standards, simplify things, harmonize things, and then I think you're on a very good platform for growth, and I believe the conditions are good.
So the industry needs to adopt a robust accounting standards and simplify, like you said, and harmonize things in a way that it can really attract more interest. And that brings even to the point of necessary reforms and market regulatory steps that could unlock more opportunities for the Nigerian mutual funds market. Any additional thing you would like to see happen more in that regard?
Well, I'm not the regulator. I'm just the head of research of a leading asset management firm. Yeah. But I think the industry has a strong interest to get this right and to harmonize things. And I think you'd only have to look at what happens when you do harmonize things and how well things can go. So if you go on to, if you go ultimately to GIPS, which is the GIPS, which is the global standard, then the whole world opens up for you and it becomes amazing. So for example, right now we can go onto the Morningstar website, which is an international site. Access is free to its service. You can go onto the Financial Times Managed Fund Service. Again, it's free. And you can compare, thousands, literally thousands. I think it's like 6,000 US, UK, South African, Singaporean funds around the world. And there's accurate step-by-step data on the performance of each of them that you can compare. And then you can say, okay, now I want to compare, I want to compare two Southeast Asian funds, or 3 or 4. And all this is free. You can have a 5-year comparison. You just have to go onto the site.
Very interesting. I like the part of the fact that there is a Morningstar Financial Times managed fund service that can allow you to access all these funds. 6,000 you said, US, UK, South Africa, Singapore, and they give you accurate data. So that's the importance of the GIPS and standards and harmonization, because people would like to look at our funds in Nigeria and see accurate data and be able to make that right decision. And that leads me to the fact of what are your words for investors in the mutual funds market this year? Millennials, retail investors, all classes of investors are looking at the mutual funds market.
Completely. No. I mean, this is where the kind of the real work starts. It's all right. It's all one thing to it's all very well to point out what could be improved, but on the other hand, the real work lies in educating people, teaching clients what they need to know, speaking at public events, and getting in touch with associations like the Association of Corporate and Individual Investment Advisors and associations like that, and saying, look, let's get our message across. It's a pretty simple one. It benefits the industry, it benefits the savers, and so the real hard work starts now, I think.
And for you, being the head of research of Coronation Asset Management, looking at how the industry has evolved and all that, what has been the interesting story in Nigeria's mutual funds market in the journey so far? I know that.
I think there are lots of interesting stories. I mean, the first up is that if you look at Treasury bills in the period 2011 to 2019, so quite a long period of time, they paid something like 247 basis points or 2.47 percentage points over the rate of inflation. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, and therefore, if you had an instrument like a money market fund or a fixed income fund, and you could hold those on the long term, you were beating inflation every year. So there's some fascinating stories like that, where people could have accumulated wealth and actually kept it, kind of in real terms. And then if you look at the equity market, I think there are sort of a handful of stocks whose return on equity is over 20% in the long term. Not a huge number of stocks, and not particularly liquid, some of them, but they're there if you go look for them. And so there are these turn stories. You turn over enough stones, look under enough stones, and you hunt around a bit. There is good stuff that you will find. And I think, for someone who's a regular saver, then getting a service in this country that's as good as the Morningstar service internationally, or the alternatively, but also complementary, the Financial Times Managed Funds service as well, then these things are like the important first steps to having a very educated Nigerian investor base.
Yes, very educated Nigerian investor base. And as we wrap up, what markets in Africa are those markets that when you look at, you say Nigeria is Africa's largest economy and can be greater in potential in funds market? Which one or two markets have you also identified in Africa?
Well, I'm probably biased because I've lived and worked here for 7 years, so I'm going to say Nigeria. Yeah. But I think it's always a numbers game. Yeah. And so, if you have the highest population, then obviously, then you have the highest potential for mutual funds to take off as an asset class. But Ghana and Kenya aren't doing badly. South Africa is way down the road, has a highly developed mutual fund industry, pension fund industry. But to get into those markets, you have to go into foreign currencies, which is another subject entirely. So I'm pretty keen on this market. I think the prospects are very, very good.
Yeah, prospects are very, very good, and we really hope that at the end of 2021 we're able to see some remarkable growth. I know you said it will not be 50%, but with 1.6 trillion naira, it would be nice to see at least 2 trillion value or more than that, just to show how robust the market is. But like you rightly said, it all boils down to effective accounting standards, harmonizing the whole markets and the funds, and connecting to a global standard that gives us accurate data that investors can access and help deepen the market. And of course, educating investors on the value of the mutual funds market, which they can assess and also make right investment decisions. Thank you once again, Mr. Guy Czartoryski, for the time. It's been nice discussing the Nigerian mutual funds market with you. Mr. Guy Czartoryski is the head of research, Coronation Asset Management.
Dr. Obasi, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
And hope to have you subsequently to discuss other developments in the markets.
Thank you. Goodbye.
And that will be all for this edition of the Market Review. You can join our website, www.proshareng.com. And if you go to our search bar and click mutual funds, you will see this latest summary report from Coronation Asset Management around the 2020 mutual funds market performance in Nigeria, published on ProShare, to gain more insight on how valuable the mutual funds market is in the Nigerian capital market ecosystem. To come your way again, thank you for being part of the show.